let me just start then. I wanted a very warm welcome to everybody, and particularly to Ruth on a very busy evening that she's sharing some time with us. It's really very exciting that Ruth runs quite a lot of these business improvement districts called BIDs. In fact, she's known locally as the Queen of the BIDs. And as luck would have it, the National Liberal Club is now in the latest bid that Ruth has created, which is actually the 69th bid. I don't think she's had a hand in all 69, but the one that, the latest one in Whitehall is the 69th, and Ruth is running that. And so it's of great interest really to the National Liberal Club, just what that might mean for us, and you know how we can help Ruth to make it a real success, because it's at the early stages. And in fact, Ruth's going to come back, and we're going to obviously entice her onto the terrace where a lot of other people are, but perhaps when the weather's a bit colder. But anyway, without further ado, I just want to say a very big welcome to Ruth, and thanks to her as Chief Executive of all things that move in South Westminster and beyond. She's got a presentation, and we'll be talking for about 15 to 20 minutes. And then there's time for questions. So do think about your questions as well. And thank you all so much for coming. It's so good to see you. Over to you, Ruth, please. Thank you very much.
Great. Oh, no, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And good evening, everybody. I hope you've all got something cold to sip whilst we're online this evening. But thank you so much for making the time to log in and join us, and obviously learn a little bit more about the world of business improvement districts. I appreciate it's a very, very warm evening indeed. What I thought I'd do is I've got a PowerPoint presentation, which I'll obviously talk through. And I wanted to really just set some context around business improvement districts. Talk a little bit about what BIDs actually do, what do they deliver, what difference do they make, what you know value do they add, and then I've got a video at the end which kind of really just summarises and captures quite nicely everything that I'm going to talk through, but provides some nice examples of what BIDs deliver on. But it's quite a nice piece of animation which hopefully you'll enjoy, and then happy to take any questions that you may have after. But obviously delighted that the National Liberal Club are now part of the Whitehall Business Improvement District, which I will touch upon as I talk through this evening. And it would be great to start forging a partnership and a relationship with yourselves in terms of looking at how we can all work collaboratively together. So in terms of me, I run a company called Primera Corporation. And we tend to very much focus on regeneration, but more fundamentally the creation and development of partnerships, partnerships that are led by the business community, predominantly across central London. And we've been leading and managing and establishing some of London's most prestigious business improvement districts. So our work has become quite integral in terms of really fostering the strategic leadership and stewardship that BIDs really do obviously drive forward today. In terms of my background is in social and economic regeneration. I cut my teeth many, many years ago on London Docklands development, and I've worked across the country really on various different projects. So for me to kind of move into the world of business-led partnerships was quite a nice segue really, because what we were finding is that the business community were getting more and more involved and engaged in a lot of community regeneration and activity. And as a result of that, there were lots of discussions that were led by big regeneration specialists, big businesses with central government around looking at a more formalised mechanism such as BIDs. So if we could just move on to the next slide, please, that would be great, thank you. So in terms of BIDs for London, as Elizabeth said, there's 69 business improvement districts operating across central and greater London. There's over 300 that operate throughout the United Kingdom, and they are absolutely a force for good. They are very agile, very nimble organisations, and they work well in partnership with our public service providers. I will say that they're not the panacea to all urban management problems, and it isn't a case of one size fits all, but business improvement districts do provide the opportunity to bring the business community together to look at how they can be much more of a collective voice for good. But it's also about having representation by one lead organisation on behalf of local businesses as well. In addition to that, they're all set within a legislative framework. So bids are set up within small geographical locations like Victoria, like Whitehall, and they bring the business community together. And they go on a journey in terms of really identifying what their shared mutual interests are. So it takes a couple of years to establish a business improvement district, but once they're up and running, they're in situ for 5 years. And they have quite a rigid business plan or prospectus that's rolled out and delivered over that 5-year period. But in order to do that, it's all done through a very democratic process, which is part of the legislative framework that was set up by government, where businesses are invited to actually vote as to whether they want to have a bid or not. If the vote is successful in terms of having a 51% majority by yes vote of those that turn out to vote, and a 51% majority of the rateable value of all of those organisations that turn out to vote, then the bid becomes mandatory. So even if it's something you didn't want to support, you are then liable to pay the levy or the tax. And that money is then obviously reinvested back into the local area. And I'm going to give you some examples in terms of what that can be spent on. But in terms of how that levy is set, it's normally based on a 1% of the rateable value of your property. And then that leverages in the funding. But they're all very different in size. And in levy alone across central London, it's probably a little bit more than 24.9 now. It's probably around the £30 million a year. But it's that levy that can then generate a cocktail of funding from other sources, be it central government, local government or regional government. But it does provide the opportunity to really drive forward specific areas of activity. So if we could just go on to the next slide, please. So from a Primera perspective, we are involved in a number of business improvement districts, all very centrally London focused, all very different in size, character, makeup. So from a Victoria, Whitehall and Victoria Westminster perspective, they're very corporate led with obviously a large government representation within those bids and quite a small retail and leisure offer. But then in other areas like Cheapside in the City of London or Hatton Garden, there's a higher percentage of retail and a much more leisure offer in those bids. But again, they're very different. Cheapside generates about £400,000 per annum, whereas Victoria generates over £2 million per annum. So all very different in size and scale, but very much punch above their weight. And again, very good at really galvanising support from the local area in terms of moving things forward. And I think in terms of the districts that we encompass, it's some of London's most iconic assets that we promote. And it's really looking at what London's offer is in terms of a World Heritage Centre, but also with that very rich and diverse mix of leisure and business offer. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So in terms of what bids actually do, I think over the last 10 years, bids are relatively young. So they were introduced back in 2004. So as a sector, they're still very much establishing themselves, still very much maturing. When they were first established, and some of you may be familiar with bids, they focused very much on high streets and they focused much more on town centres. And they were around, you know, a few hanging baskets, some extra street cleaning and some marketing and events. But because the bid mechanism is so flexible, we've seen that roll out and pick up these very large corporate areas. And so what that has enabled us to do is really look at how they can have become much more strategic in their role. And particularly in the last 5 years, we've seen bids in central London really position themselves to promote the economic growth, taking on a much stronger leadership role as the custodians of the geographical area that they represent. But they really do facilitate the ambitions and strategic objectives of the business community, positioning large parts of central London as vibrant and dynamic locations. I think it's really important to add that we don't work in silo. We work very closely with the local authorities. Westminster City Council have been very pro business improvement districts, incredibly supportive. And I think across Westminster, there are about, I think it's about 13 or 14 business improvement districts. So there's a lot of leverage coming in from the private sector. And we do a lot of things around improving the quality of life, enhancing the local environment. We look at safety and well-being. We also do a lot around placemaking and big transformational projects. And I've got a couple of examples that I can share with you a little bit later on. But no two bids are the same. And the focus is very much on local economic growth, but also supporting the local residential communities, as well as the business communities and the wider stakeholder area. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So I've kind of obviously touched on the fact that it's very much about the curation and stewardship of London. And I think that's what bids do extremely well, because they are so agile and nimble and able to pivot and respond to things quickly. We don't get caught up in red tape, which makes it a lot easier for us to drive forward change much more quickly. I think we do facilitate major investment into redevelopment of public space, and there is a lot of collaboration where we've seen the model used and worked incredibly well. But it's the main driver is to create economies of scale, but also really demonstrate the value added of what these business collectives deliver on, but also really provide our business districts with a much stronger voice. So we look at a lot of transformational projects, but we also have the opportunity to be much more innovative and creative in terms of kickstarting projects. If we go on to the next slide, I can just talk you through two examples, which one is in Victoria and the other is in North Bank. And the North Bank bid is the area that spans from Trafalgar Square all the way down to the Royal Courts of Justice, and also picks up Victoria Embankment as well. So quite a large swathe of land. And then we've got the Victoria Business Improvement District. And what we have found in recent years is that bids have really played quite a fundamental role in really harnessing support from both the GLA, Transport for London, and the local authorities in really taking forward some of these placemaking schemes, as we like to call them. So Christchurch Gardens is a very good example. £1.7 million was invested into Christchurch Gardens. And if you know where Westminster City Council is, if you're looking at Westminster City Council from Victoria Street, it was a large green space just to the right of their building. It was very unloved for a very long time. Nobody really ventured in there. Nobody used the space. You couldn't even walk through it because people didn't feel very safe. And it became a haven for a lot of antisocial behaviour. We had a big problem with rough sleepers, lots of tents being erected for the rough sleeping community. At a time when green space is becoming so much more fundamental, and even more now in light of the pandemic and COVID, green space, outside space is becoming such a valuable asset. So the bid, in partnership with Westminster, invested 1.7 million into the scheme. And what we've created now is this very new civic green space that's accessible for use by everybody. And we've seen it used so much throughout the pandemic. It's been a really valuable asset, and in particular for those residents that don't have access to gardens or to green space. In addition to that, we've done lots of rain gardens, we've done lots of living walls in and around Victoria, and we also did the Diamond Garden to celebrate the Queen's Diamond Jubilee at Buckingham Palace, and that's located just in front of the Queen's Gallery on Buckingham Palace Road. The other big transformational scheme is Strand Aldwych, which I hope you're all quite familiar with. And as you know, that's been quite a busy gyratory for many, many years. It's really just a big car park for buses today. It doesn't lend itself very well in terms of providing good traffic flow. And the air quality in and around Strand Aldwych is one of the worst in central London. And it actually does exceed, obviously, all of the conditions that have been placed in terms of good air quality across central London. As a result of that, there's been lots and lots of conversations in terms of what can be done in and around Strand Aldwych for many, many years now. And I'm really pleased to say that through our partnership with Westminster City Council, and something that's really been driven by the business community. Westminster are now investing £22 million in taking out the gyratory, the ring road that runs around Strand Aldwych, and the area outside of Somerset House and King's College London will become now a new civic space, which will be on par with Trafalgar Square, which will be an area for everybody to enjoy and use, with lots of greening that will go in there. And then to the northern side, the area that runs along round where the theatres are and the Waldorf Hotel, that will become a two-way traffic scheme. And there will also be a reduction in the flow of traffic that's moving through there at the moment, and obviously improve the air quality, but really transform that part of central London. And in addition to that, we're looking at greening along the Strand, and we're also looking at the river. So we're just about to embark on a river strategy to enable us to look at how we can utilise Victoria Embankment, an area that really is very much underutilised and dissected very much by heavy traffic flow at the moment. So if you move on to the next slide. Thank you. The other big public realm strategies we're doing is in Victoria. We undertook a piece of work in 2019, which was really looking at some of the challenges around placemaking and public realm. And we've now put together a very comprehensive vision and strategy, which we're now looking at, obviously moving forward. And again, that's been done in partnership with the local community. It's also been done in partnership with Transport for London and Westminster City Council. But it's really identifying a hierarchy of projects. So looking at some quick wins in terms of greening schemes, addressing climate change, but also looking at things like freight consolidation and traffic reduction, and better movement for pedestrians and safer movement for cyclists. But it's also looking at some of those bigger catalytic projects as well, which will be rolled out over the course of the next 5 years plus. But I think with the increased pressure on the public purse, we will see bids take a greater interest in shaping their districts, but really improving the local environment and really looking at how we can create these vibrant and dynamic locations. And I think the whole purpose of our People Wanted strategy is to provide a framework for stakeholders to work together, but really working towards a very ambitious future for placemaking and really thinking a little bit more outside the box in terms of creating something quite sustainable, but quite spectacular and quite special as well. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So in terms of the role that bids have played during the pandemic, have they still been something that the business community have really wanted to invest in? And the answer to that is absolutely yes, they have. And we brought Whitehall on during the pandemic. So Whitehall is a new bid that's been developed during the pandemic. I think businesses see that they have a crucial role to play in the whole of the recovery process. And whilst we did a lot of tactical delivery during the pandemic, we had security patrols, big rough sleeping problem in central London. Lots of the rough sleepers were taken in and housed by a lot of the hotels that weren't obviously trading, but there was also quite a vulnerable section of community that would not come in. So we continued to fund our security patrols for their safety and well-being. We've also done a lot of polling and research because we are predominantly corporate-led business improvement districts. Are the office workers ever going to come back? The answer is yes, and that the office is certainly not dead. The development pipeline for office buildings has been as buoyant as it's ever been before, and there is a huge demand in and around Victoria because we're so close to a multimodal transport hub such as Victoria Station, that we are being inundated with requests for large HQs to be placed here and located in Victoria. But the feedback that we're getting is that businesses will come back, but they will be doing the hybrid working from home. So looking at that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as being the most popular days that people will want to return, but perhaps having a longer day when they're here and making more of that day, so that also supports the retail, leisure and hospitality sectors, because I think culture is also equally as important. And I think whilst over the last 18 months, we've been really tested, I don't think we can underestimate getting the recovery right. And that's looking at jobs, it's looking at how we retain talent. The hospitality sector is on its knees at the moment because they just cannot recruit staff. The salaries for chefs has really gone through the roof. And with the pandemic that we've got at the moment, that's just adding to the challenges that businesses are facing, particularly in leisure and hospitality. But it's also how we reinvigorate our cities. And I think it's really putting that energy and optimism in there to make it much cleaner, more attractive, but more inspirational and more innovative, but creating more workspaces, but really encouraging people to come back in, but really reimagining what the city should look like. So we've played a really fundamental role, and that's been recognised by our public service providers, by our public service partners. And I think that's helped to really foster a much stronger working relationship in terms of the role that we play. If we go on to the next slide, please. In terms of Whitehall and South Westminster, so as Elizabeth said at the beginning, and I've also touched on in my introduction, the South Westminster Business Alliance is a collection of 4 business improvement districts. It's the North Bank, Whitehall, Victoria Westminster, which picks up Parliament Square predominantly, and the Victoria Bid. And the idea is, it's how we can have a central voice, an influential voice for the South Westminster area. So it's really representing the business voice for South Westminster. We tend to find in South Westminster that we have to compete quite a lot with the West End. That's a real jewel in the crown, I think, for Westminster. So by having a more united voice, a more collective voice, means that we can really lobby for some of those big transformational schemes that I've touched upon already. And I think through a more collective approach, we can also identify more opportunities that we can actually work together on going forward. If we go on to the next slide, some of those very big catalytic projects that we're looking at is the Riverside transformation from Whitehall right down to Blackfriars. The City Corporation are currently looking at a river strategy. It makes absolute sense for us to look at Victoria Embankment right up to the Palace of Westminster, and really looking at what that transformation looks like. I think it's really important to pick up, we're not trying to be a new South Bank because our offer is completely different. But what we have is a swathe of land that is so underutilised and brings so much opportunity. And I think with the Thames Tideway Tunnel and the public realm improvements that will come from them, there's an opportunity for us to really transform that part of central London. Parliament Square is looking at having some big changes in and around in terms of the road layout and what that green space can be used for. And we're working with Network Rail, Transport for London, the GLA and Westminster City Council on the redevelopment of Victoria Station. We've just undertaken a very large feasibility study that will be published later this year, and we're just about to embark on our consultation strategy, very much working with the local residential communities on what those proposals and conceptual designs may potentially look like for Victoria Station. And then we have Strand Aldwych, which I've obviously touched upon. And then if we go to the final slide, in terms of maximising the potential of bids, I think our mandate is very much to promote investment. It's obviously to support the long-term future of our districts, but I think we know the value that bids make to the London economy. So it's about promoting creativity, it's about promoting entrepreneurship, but it's also looking at how we can attract and retain talent and how bids can contribute to London, which is very much a city for all. And what I'd like to finish on now is a short video, which really just helps to put into perspective some of what I've chatted about. So we'll pop that on, thank you. I've got no sound coming through, have you?
Was that better? No, all right.
No.
Let's try something else. Okay. How's that?
Yes.
Since 2015, the Cheapside Business Alliance has worked successfully alongside our partners and local businesses to create a cleaner, safer and more vibrant environment in which to live, work and socialise. As the first bid in the City of London, the CBA has a lot to be proud of. It's vital that we build on the momentum we've created and ensure that Cheapside continues to grow as one of the capital's key 7-day destinations. With the help of our ambassadors' real-time reporting, we've been tackling antisocial behaviour and environmental issues. As part of City of London's Plastic Free City campaign, we commissioned 2 free drinking water refill points in the bid area. We have delivered environmental initiatives and workshops alongside local businesses and other stakeholders, and are working in partnership with the City of London on a Greening Cheapside project to transform the area around St Paul's Underground Station. We commissioned employment and training agency Step Ahead to provide assistance with recruitment in the bid footprint, placing local people into local vacancies. Our ambassadors provide a warm welcome into Cheapside. Working in partnership with London Festival of Architecture, we've showcased Cheapside's stunning architectural backdrop and developed ways to enhance the visitor's experience. Our Cheapside Privilege Card and app have successfully promoted over 70 offers to local employees, encouraging them to stay in the area longer. In 2017, we were delighted to welcome the area's first hotel, the Ned. We've provided over 100 free events and supported campaigns such as the City of London Police Gift Tag campaign, which delivered over 400 Christmas gifts to local children. Creating networking opportunities is at the heart of the bid's activities. We've helped bring together the business community, facilitating opportunities for collaboration and partnerships. Our vision for the future is exciting and ambitious. But to continue our work, we need your support. Building on the strong foundation of our first term and listening to the wishes of the Cheapside community, the CBA will increase investment in environmental projects and play a key role in enhancing the area with high-profile events and cultural activities. With your help, we look forward to creating and maintaining a flourishing and vibrant Cheapside.
That's great, thank you very much. Well, I hope that brought it to life a little bit, and you can see the range of and the diversity in terms of what bids actually deliver on. I hope that's given some of you that haven't got obviously a background in bids or haven't been introduced to bids before, a little bit more of an overview of what we do. But for me, more fundamentally, it would be fantastic to think about how going forward we can develop our relationship with the National Liberal Club. Didn't vote in our Whitehall ballot, so it would be great to see how we can really build a relationship with you going forward. So in 2023, when we have our renewal ballot, you'll be at the front of the queue with your ballot paper. But really happy to take any questions if anybody has them.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Who's got some questions? Anybody got a question? I'll start with my question. While we're waiting for other questions, how can the National Liberal Club benefit from now being in a bid area, and how can we help you deliver growth and vibrancy, which actually we're rather good at the National Liberal Club?
Well, absolutely. So it would be great to explore. I mean, obviously we have a number of different steering committees and groups that are obviously established to drive forward our strategic themes and objectives. And I don't know if there are any members from the Liberal Club that would have relevant skill sets where they would like to give some time to perhaps participate in some of those committees, but more fundamentally on some of our bigger public realm schemes that we're driving forward in terms of working alongside us, but also around that lobbying piece as well, to have that stronger collective voice. It would be great to see how we could perhaps utilise some of the knowledge, the expertise of obviously your organisation, the membership that you've got.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's lots more as well, and hopefully over time, as things evolve and grow, there'll be other aspects that come to the table.
Well, that's fantastic, and we want to get you to come. Well, you haven't been to the National Liberal Club yet, so that's the first thing to get sorted. Yeah. So we'll have you over as quickly as possible, and we'll start from there. Who's got a question? Tudor, have you got a question? I can see your hand.
I think Charles had a question.
Oh, Charles. Sorry, Charles. Charles, can you unmute, Charles? Can you hear us?
I think Charles is frozen.
I think he's frozen now.
Okay. Who? Anybody else?
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, Charles. Yes, please.
Ruth, thank you very much for that. It's been fascinating, and one realises there's substantial room for improvement. One of my concerns is that I have a disabled wife, and getting in and out of London, we've got an adapted vehicle, and we've got it fairly well worked out. But every time I see road space disappearing, and I can understand there's good reason for actually restricting the amount of traffic going through, my heart sinks really, because I think getting us into central London will get increasingly difficult. If she's in a wheelchair in a bus, that's not really very safe. The brakes don't necessarily hold the wheelchair firm. So that's one anxiety, but obviously I can see that the need and the desirability of reducing the throughput of traffic is obviously a top priority.
No, absolutely, Charles. No, and it's a very valid point. And interestingly enough, one of the aspects, and perhaps I'll share with you all, if you're interested, I can send it through, is a copy of our People Wanted strategy, because I would really welcome your views, because we've really ensured that we've tried to have a very big aspect that focuses on accessibility, and we're actually just about to embark on a separate piece of work which is very much looking at how accessible our local business districts are, and what more should we be doing to make them more accessible to individuals. So not just from travelling in a car, but also then moving around, either be it in obviously a wheelchair, or if you're being assisted or trying to walk around, if you've got a visual impairment or something, how we can make that much easier for people to get around the city. So I'd really welcome your comments on what we've put into the People Wanted, because we absolutely do want to build something that is sustainable but equally accessible for everybody.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, I don't think so. A couple of people have had to leave, but one of them on leaving said, many thanks for organising, very interesting. We'll certainly be keeping an eye on how this progresses. And thank Ruth for her eye-opening presentation. So I think there's a lot of scope for us kind of getting together, and as you say, using the expertise as well as the facilities at the National Liberal Club. There are lots of ways in which we can connect. We do weddings, by the way. That's something we want to particularly increase. So we kind of run our own business, and we've got lots and lots of events, and really quite a remarkable building. But I know that Ruth has to go to yet another Whitehall function. So if you haven't got any more questions, then you'll hopefully see Ruth around the National Liberal Club, and we'll help her plot, lobby,
Yeah.
whatever seems necessary. But I do think it's important that the National Liberal Club does actually connect with its locality, and this is a wonderful opportunity. And of course, you know, it may help us recruit members, not that we're short of members, but a lot of people just don't realise what a wonderful facility, and we'd be very keen to get more business people involved with us in lots of ways. So
we'd love to do that, Elizabeth, and we have a magazine, and we'd love to do a feature on the National Liberal Club as well, if we could do that.
Excellent.
That would be fantastic. Yes. And it would be great if I could follow up, really just to perhaps have a meeting with the National Liberal Club, just to explore further how we could perhaps look at some nice tangible outputs that we can kind of move forward with.
We'll certainly set that up. I think it's a lot of nodding I can see, so people agreeing. Well, thank you very much for a huge. Oh, wait a minute, Tudor's come back. Yes.
Is it possible to get a copy of those excellent slides?
Yes. Yes, I've sent it all over, so I'm very happy for it to be circulated around, so including the video. So, and what I'll also do is I'll send over the links to the Victoria websites.
Yes.
And the North Bank, because there's some very good animation on there to see what the Victoria bids have done, which obviously relates much more closely to your geographical location. So I'll send those links over too.
And for your information, we're about to celebrate the 140th year of the National Liberal Club. So it's been around since 1882. So preparations starting for 2022. So that's rather an exciting opportunity. But that's just one of the many things that are being planned and go on at the National Liberal Club. Also, well, thank you all very, very much for joining us for a quick and very dynamic session. Thank you, Ruth, of course, for your presentation. And a big thank you too to Subu and Emily, who have stood in to sort out the technology of making this possible at all. And they've done a huge amount of work and actually stepped in with very little notice, as they have often done. They are a star team. So thank you, Subu and Emily, and very big thank you to you, Ruth. And I hope the rest of the evening works out well for you.
Yes, thank you, and stay cool, everybody. That's one of my parting words.